She told me she couldn't breathe around me anymore. I remember the way she said it, like I was the problem. Like the walls of our home had started closing in on her, and I was the one turning the crank. Her voice trembled just enough to make it sound sincere, but I've seen actresses in courtroom dramas who sold it better. I just need some time, Evan. Some space. That was the line, the moment, the pivot point that broke our symmetry. She packed her bags that evening with a kind of urgency that didn't match her story. And she didn't go to her sister's or rent a hotel room. No. She went straight to him. Marcus Reed, her so-called friend from work, the one she'd conveniently brought up in conversation a few too many times. Her escape route was already paved and waiting. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I let her go. She thought my silence meant surrender. She mistook my stillness for emotional paralysis. What she didn't realize was that I had already taken inventory of everything that mattered. And in doing so, I found one detail she clearly overlooked. The lease, our loft in the West End, the one we moved into after we got married, was still entirely in my name. I paid the deposit, I signed the paperwork. Every document, every key, every bill, mine. So I waited. Quietly, coldly. I tracked their schedule, knew when they'd be out of town together, likely under the pretense of some corporate retreat. I gave them the courtesy of absence. 2 weeks was long enough. Then I made the call. I told the landlord I was vacating the unit immediately. Official notice. No need to forward mail. On the day they returned, the sidewalk outside our building told the whole story. Neatly boxed clothes, folded bedding, framed prints from our vacations, all lined up in silent judgment. There was no confrontation, no dramatic scene. Just one text. You finally have space. Use it. And with that I left. No shouting, no second chances, just the sound of my footsteps echoing down the hallway. As I turned the page on a chapter she'd already tried to rewrite. Erica's departure wasn't a spontaneous decision, even if she liked to pretend otherwise. In the weeks before she left, her behavior had already started to shift. Subtle at first, but then more deliberate. She stopped joining Evan on the couch after dinner. She no longer laughed at his dry remarks, or made eye contact over morning coffee. Their conversations became transactions. What time will you be home? Did you pay the water bill? Is the dog's vet appointment still on Thursday? There were no fights, no explosive arguments. That wasn't how Evan operated. He was never a man of chaos. He watched patterns. He listened to silences. And the absence of warmth in her tone said more than any raised voice could. It told him that she had already emotionally exited their marriage long before she packed her bags. She began staying out later than usual. Work dinners, she said. Team-building nights, networking drinks, creative, brainstorming sessions. Evan never objected. He didn't even ask questions. He just started documenting. Quietly, he checked the shared calendar on her iPad and noticed new events suddenly marked private. Her phone, once left on the kitchen counter, was now clutched tightly or kept face down. Messages pinged in silent code. It didn't take much effort to piece things together. Erica wasn't hiding an affair, as much as she was hoping Evan would be too emotionally numb or too polite to confront her. But he was neither. He was simply collecting proof. Not to start a fight, not to beg, just to make sure that when the moment came, he'd have no doubts and no regrets. One evening, while Erica claimed to be at a gallery opening, Evan took out their lease agreement and reread it for the third time. His signature was the only one on it. He smiled faintly at the irony. She had always handled the emotional terrain of their relationship, while he handled the logistics. The very thing she overlooked, her disinterest in the boring paperwork, was the lever he would pull to dismantle everything. She returned that night at 1:14 a.m., smelling faintly of cologne. That wasn't his. He said nothing. He offered no cold shoulder or cold war. Just a calm good night, as he shut off his bedside lamp. That was the last night they would share that bed. In the days that followed, he began to subtly detach from the shared routines. He stopped bringing her coffee in the mornings. He no longer asked about her day or waited for her to come home before ordering dinner. The man who had once planned anniversaries with handwritten notes and curated playlists was now carefully categorizing what belongings were his and what she would be reclaiming from the sidewalk. When Erica finally said the words, "I need some space," it was less of a request and more of a confirmation. Evan simply nodded, as if he hadn't been expecting it but accepted it nonetheless. "Take what you need," he told her, which she mistook for grace. She didn't realize that those 4 words weren't a peace offering. They were a formality. She packed lightly, believing she'd return at some point to talk things through, maybe even test the waters for reconciliation once her fling lost its shine. What she didn't realize was that Evan had already started planning her exit down to the hour. Her space wasn't temporary. It was being engineered to become permanent. And so the unraveling wasn't some furious explosion. It was a slow, precise deconstruction of their life together. One missed glance, one hidden message, one silent night at a time. By the time she left, Evan wasn't broken. He was prepared. Evan didn't believe in gut feelings. He believed in patterns, routines, the silent cadence of daily life. And when that rhythm broke, he listened. Not to the noise, but to what wasn't being said. Erica had offered him her silence, and he returned the favor. But beneath that calm exterior, Evan began to build a quiet case. It started with passwords, shared accounts, once created in trust, now mined for quiet confirmations. The grocery delivery app showed address changes in her favorites. One morning, he noticed she had added Marcus's building to the delivery list. A small detail, but intentional. He downloaded the invoices. Organic teas, Greek yogurt, and a brand of protein powder Evan had never once seen in their kitchen. Then came the rideshare receipts. She hadn't remembered to change the email on the account. So while she took care to delete texts and lock her phone, she forgot that Uber still sent receipts to the joint email they once used for budgeting. A Tuesday night trip to an unfamiliar address. A Saturday pickup from a boutique hotel. Another ride, 3:21 a.m., one-way destination Marcus Reed's apartment complex. He didn't confront her. There was no need. He simply opened a folder on his computer, gave it a name, exit strategy, and began dragging evidence into it. Screenshots, receipts, time-stamped photos from the apartment building's public security camera that Marcus never noticed when they walked past it, hand in hand. The concierge, whom Evan had once tipped generously every Christmas, happily provided the access logs for the building. Evan printed it all, neatly in color, and placed each page into a slim leather folder. Not because he needed to use it, but because there's something satisfying about turning digital betrayal into something tactile. Something real. Paper has weight. Pixels can lie. At night, while Erica was gone on her overnight project meetings, Evan would sit in their once-shared office and review it all. Not obsessively, not with anger, just calmly, clinically. This wasn't punishment. This was closure. She had made a choice. He was simply documenting it. And through all of it, he didn't stop being polite. He still washed her coffee mug. He still fed the dog she had insisted they adopt. He still paid the bills, smiled at neighbors, and responded to her increasingly rare text messages with sure and no problem. But behind that civility was resolve. She thought she was slipping away undetected, that Evan's silence was oblivion. What she didn't know was that he had mapped every move she made. And while she played house with a man who didn't know the lease wasn't in her name, Evan was turning her fantasy escape into a documented act of destruction. He didn't need to confront her. He needed only to let her walk far enough into her lie that when the ground fell out from under her, she couldn't say she hadn't chosen the path herself. Evan didn't rush. That was never his style. Every move he made had purpose, precision. By the time he decided to act, everything was already in place. The evidence folder was closed, the lease reviewed, and his plan perfected to the hour. Erica believed she still held control of the narrative, an illusion Evan was in no hurry to disrupt. She had taken the weekend off again, supposedly on a client-facing retreat. Evan didn't ask questions. He nodded, wished her good luck, and helped load her suitcase into the back seat of Marcus's car when he pulled into their driveway like he belonged there. Marcus never looked Evan in the eyes. He didn't have to. The cowardice was written in his posture, shoulders tight, fake smile glued to his face, avoiding any interaction that might require accountability. Once they left, Evan locked the door behind them and walked through the apartment slowly. He didn't rush to pack or throw things out. He moved like a curator through a fading exhibit. This space, once filled with quiet rituals of shared life, her humming in the kitchen, the scent of her jasmine shampoo in the bathroom, the stack of unread books by the bed, was no longer a home. It was a memory, and Evan was here to box it away. He started with her side of the closet, careful not to disturb the order she loved so much. Each blouse was folded, each pair of heels placed back into its box. He packed every item meticulously, not out of sentiment, but because disorder would give her a reason to claim victimhood. There would be no chaos to point to, only consequence. The kitchen was next, the mugs she loved, the artisanal oils she never used, the wine glasses she bought for special nights, but filled with cheap Cabernet on Tuesdays when Marcus texted her late. He wrapped each one in newspaper and laid them gently in a box labeled Fragile. In the bedroom, he removed the framed wedding photo from her nightstand. He didn't destroy it. That would have been indulgent. Instead, he placed it face down in the box marked Miscellaneous. She could decide what to do with the past when she saw it under bubble wrap. Once everything was packed, Evan stacked the boxes neatly by the front door. He vacuumed, took out the trash, called the landlord, and submitted the lease termination form he had filled out 2 days earlier. When asked for the forwarding address, he declined to provide one. "No need," he said plainly. "I won't be returning." Then he sat on the couch, the one she picked out, and insisted matched the color of stability, and sent the final message. "You finally have space. Use it." No anger, no name-calling, just a simple truth that could not be argued with. The home was no longer hers. The fantasy life she thought she was building with Marcus now began on the sidewalk, in taped boxes, under a graying sky. Evan didn't wait around to see her reaction. He wasn't there for the fallout. Revenge, in his eyes, wasn't a moment. It was a mirror, and when she looked into it, she'd see what she left behind, and what never truly belonged to her. The sky was beginning to dim as the Uber pulled up to the curb in front of the building Erica used to call home. She stepped out first, chatting lightly with Marcus, whose hand rested casually on her back. They were both relaxed, savoring the afterglow of their weekend getaway, oblivious to what awaited them. Erica fumbled with her keys as they reached the front steps, but something caught her eye before she could insert them into the lock. Boxes, neatly stacked, taped and labeled. Her suitcase sat beside them, upright, like it had been standing there patiently for her return. There was no note, no confrontation waiting at the door, only stillness. At first, she blinked, confused. Then she recognized the handwriting on the box labeled Bedroom Erica. A frown formed. She looked at Marcus, whose face was now drawn tight with uncertainty. He glanced around as if expecting a camera crew to jump out and declare it a prank. That's when her phone buzzed. One new message. "You finally have space. Use it. Evan." The weight of the words dropped on her like a slow avalanche. Her chest tightened as her fingers hovered over the screen. It wasn't just the message, it was the finality of it. The precision, the absence of anger, no begging, no accusations, just resolution. It was the silence between words that hit hardest. A silence that screamed, "I am done." She looked around, suddenly aware of how public it all was. A neighbor across the street peeked through a window. Another walked their dog, slowing as they passed, eyes flicking toward the sad display of cardboard and folded memories. Marcus took a step back, instinctively distancing himself. Unsure what his role was now in the middle of a mess he hadn't expected to wear so publicly. "Wait, this can't be permanent," she muttered, almost to herself. But it was. Evan wasn't inside. He wasn't behind the door waiting to fight or talk or cry. He was gone, vanished not in rage but in resolution. Elsewhere, miles away, Evan sat at a small cafe tucked into a quiet street. A warm cup of black coffee steamed in front of him. The world around him moved gently. Laughter from a nearby table, the soft shuffle of pages turning, the city breathing its Sunday night rhythm. He wasn't scrolling through her messages. He wasn't checking to see if she responded. He didn't need to. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing he'd taken his power back without ever raising his voice. She had asked for space. He gave it to her, just not in the way she imagined. Space wasn't freedom, not anymore. It was a void she would now have to fill alone, without the foundation she took for granted. Back at the curb, Erica stood frozen, phone in hand, surrounded by the wreckage of her own making. Her wish had been granted. The space was hers. And Evan? He simply turned the page. Not with vengeance, but with peace.